Welcome to this short talk on menopause and cognition. First of all, I would like to take just a couple of minutes to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Liz Simpson. I'm a registered health psychologist with the Healthcare Professions Council and a chartered psychologist with the British Psychological Society. I am a senior lecturer at Ulster University and I have worked there for over 20 years. I have almost 30 years experience of research on the menopause. And my interest and research in this area really began with a master's degree in health psychology, where my dissertation was based on the menopause, looking at its psychological impact on women. This led to a PhD based in the Royal Victoria Hospital in Belfast at the then regional HRT clinic, with the late Professor William Thompson, who was then head of obstetrics and gynecology at Queen's and at the Royal. So I was there for about 8 years as I was doing my PhD part-time. As a health psychologist, I adopt a biopsychosocial approach to health. And I will explain a little bit about what I mean by this. So I'm interested really in how the underlying biological mechanisms and processes, so in this case, changing hormone levels around the time of the menopause, can impact on our physical health and our psychological well-being. Also, how this time in a woman's life impacts on social situations such as relationships. And this can be relationships within the family or relationships within the workplace. It also coincides with lots of social changes that might be happening, such as becoming a grandparent or a carer, maybe for an elderly relative or mother or father, or perhaps being faced with retirement or divorce. All of these have the potential to impact on our quality of life and psychological well-being during the menopausal transition. So the focus of much of my work and research over the last few years has really been to gain a better understanding of what the menopause is and the health needs of menopausal women during this time, and to design and implement more effective interventions to promote well-being in menopausal women. As a result of this research, I have supervised several PhD projects and numerous MSc projects on health and well-being during menopause. I have published over 50 scientific papers and 2 book chapters looking at healthy aging and menopause. Presenting my work at national and international conferences, I have collaborated on funded projects on menopause, one for the Alpro Foundation entitled The Health Benefits of Soy Drinks on Menopausal Symptoms, Mood and Cognitive Function. I have hosted a number of menopause cafes and given public talks for organizations and community groups to raise the profile of menopause and to provide a space for women to share their experience of menopause. So I want to talk a little bit now on the impact that the menopause has on the brain. And I'm going to specifically focus really on cognition, but I want to talk a little bit about the impact of estrogen deficiency, or reduced estrogen levels on the brain at the time of menopause. So we know from the research that has been done that estrogen promotes blood flow to the brain. The brain has estrogen receptors throughout, and specifically in those areas that are responsible for learning and memory. So if we have reduced estrogen, it stands to reason that that might actually contribute to brain fog or reductions in sort of our memory capacity at around the time of the menopause. It is also got estrogen receptors in those areas of the brain that are thought to be responsible for emotional regulation. So again, lots of women might experience mood swings around the time of the menopausal transition. And it is also, influences or responsible for those parts of the brain that sort of control satiety and our eating behaviors. And again, some women will experience kind of, difficulties with regulating eating behaviors around this time. So just thinking and focusing then on cognition, reductions in estrogen at the menopause may lead to impaired cognitive function. And certainly there's some evidence to suggest that if women take hormone therapy, so therefore they're sort of replacing their lost natural estrogens, there's some evidence to suggest that it improves blood flow to the brain and also consequently improves memory scores on tests that women are given to sort of assess their memory at around this time. So it can kind of reverse the effect of the menopausal transition and those reduced estrogens. So it's suggesting here that there's strong evidence that estrogen deficiency is having some sort of an impact on our memory and our ability to kind of function cognitively around this time. So from the research that's been done, it's suggested that about 60% of women report issues with memory or brain fog around the menopausal transition. And certainly when I started off and when I was doing my PhD, I found that a lot of the women that were coming to the HRT clinic were reporting problems with their memory. So much so that I actually decided to investigate this further and include it as part of my PhD work, because it wasn't something that I had thought about previously to that. And it was really through the women complaining themselves about this that it sparked my interest, and I wanted to find out a little bit more. And I wanted to find out the extent to which memory is impacted by the menopausal transition. So in my own research and research that's been done with some of my PhD students, we were particularly interested in everyday working memory. So what that means is our memory test was really looking at things like remembering names, the types of things that we would do normally as part of our everyday life. So remembering names, being able to recall a story that we had been told, remembering where we had placed an object when we were cued. So when a buzzer went off and we were asked, they had to say, I maybe had taken their keys or their glasses or something like that, and we had put it into a drawer. So when the buzzer went off, they had to say, can I have my glasses back? And it's there in the top drawer. So kind of looking about the time, looking at timing of events and whether they're able to remember those types of things. And also remembering sort of spatial memory, remembering a route around a room. So it was sort of like a designated path that they were asked to take around a room. And they were asked, then that was immediate, and sort of then they were asked maybe 20 minutes later if they could remember what the route was again. Now, on this memory test, it was really designed for people who had head injuries, so that the people that were working with them on a daily basis and from this test would know exactly where they were having problems, and they could intervene and help them. So when we initially gave this test out, I was expecting most of our women to pass it with flying colors and that there wouldn't be any problems. But unfortunately, that is not what I found. What we have found in the research that we've done using this test, and we've actually sort of made it a little bit more difficult because we wanted to check that what my initial findings were accurate. We made it a little bit more difficult for them. And what we found was that almost 60% of the participants in our studies had impaired memory scores on these measures of everyday working memory. And that was quite shocking. When we looked at those areas of cognition or cognitive function that were affected, we found that remembering event or the timing of when an event should happen was actually impaired. Now, how does that translate into everyday life? Well, that might actually be you remembering to take medication, or remembering that you've got a dental appointment, or that you have to be somewhere for a set time. That's how it kind of translates over into everyday life. So maintaining attention and concentration, we found that those areas were affected by women. And again, women would freely say to us, that makes sense to me because, I find it really hard to maintain my attention. I find I'm drifting off, or I'm thinking about other things. And they would have said things like, I can't read a novel anymore, so I tend to look at short, maybe magazine articles, or I read the newspaper, but I go back to my novel and I won't remember what I've read. So, they maybe don't do that anymore. So it's changing their behavior as well, and changing some of the things that they really used to enjoy. So, and recall of information, story recall seemed to be effective. So that memory for facts and information was being impacted here. And spatial memory. So what we found was that women, tended to not be able to remember that route around the room. So that is, that can be problematic. So that might include things like maybe going to a car park and looking for your car and not being able to find it, or not being able to remember where you'd actually parked it, or maybe finding yourself somewhere and thinking, oh, how do I get back to there? Or how do I find my way back to where I started off? So those types of things. So quite interesting kind of issues and problems coming out here. And then that anecdotal evidence to kind of almost lend a little bit of support to that as well. From our recommendations and from the research that we have done, so what can we do about it? So although decline in estrogens may impact on memory, there may also be other things that are contributing to this change in our memory. And I think it's really worth mentioning this and being aware of this. Thinking about memory and concentration, and thinking about what we call a domino effect. Troublesome menopausal symptoms. So things like, maybe having night sweats or hot flushes. Night sweats in particular can be really problematic, I think, for concentration and memory, because if you're up 2 or 3 times during the night, maybe changing your clothes, if you're soaked through, or maybe changing bed linen, which I know women are doing because they've told me this is what they're doing, it's disrupting their sleep and they're tired. And then they can't function on a daily basis as a result of that. It stands to reason it's going to have an impact on your memory and your ability to maintain attention and to concentrate on what you're doing during the day. So there could be that domino effect. That could be, hampering that and making it worse. We know that some women experience sleeping problems in their own right. And that can be, that could be an additive effect on the memory issues and the brain fog that they're experiencing on a daily basis. So again, we need to be thinking about that. So some of the things to promote memory might take those things into consideration that I want, to kind of give you an overview of. I think one of the most important things as we get older is to keep the brain active. There's lots of research out there that suggests if someone uses their brain and they keep it active, they're less, they can delay the onset of cognitive decline. There's less evidence of it as they get into their 70s and into their 80s. And I'm talking about things like crossword puzzles, reading. Reading is one of those things that's really important to keep that up, learning new skills. So maybe learning a new language or learning how to play an instrument later in life. All of these things have been found to be neuroprotective and to guard against cognitive decline in later life. So it's preparing, it's preparing that brain and keeping it active. The brain is a muscle and we need to keep it sort of active and keep it going. Reducing your stress levels. There's nothing worse than stress. If you are worrying about something, it's drawing your attention away from what you're trying to focus on. So, doing a little bit of relaxation or mindfulness, to, learning to be in the present, learning to switch off as well is really, really important. And relaxation and mindfulness can help you and teach you how to do that. Promoting better sleep quality, really tidying up those bedtime routines. So having a set bedtime and having a set time for getting up in the morning. And, if you're a coffee drinker or a tea drinker like I am, trying not to consume caffeine too late in the day. And, some of the experts recommend that we don't drink caffeine after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So just, and not having screens, not having your television on, not being glued to your phone, an hour before you go to bed. So really, making the bedroom low lighting, making it cool, somewhere very relaxing that you can go to and kind of put the day behind you to try and promote your sleep. So really, really tidying up that bedtime routine. Exercise regularly, increasing your heart rate to the point that it's kind of leaving you slightly out of breath. So brisk walking, maybe cycling, swimming, things like that are all good examples of sort of moderate physical activity that get you slightly out of breath. This all promotes blood flow throughout the whole body, and it promotes blood flow in particular to the brain, which is really, really important as we get older. To keep that flow going, that, we know that blood flow to the brain is really important for cognitive function as we get older. As we've already kind of maybe talked about in some of the other talks that I've done, or some of the other sort of mini webinars, eating a diet that promotes brain health is really, really key. So plenty of fresh fruit and vegetables, getting those leafy greens in there, eating the rainbow. When we're looking at fruit and veg, it's all about eating as many different colors as we possibly can. Fish is really, really important. Fish is a brain food, and especially oily fish, getting the omega-3s in. The brain loves omega-3s. It's very rich in omega-3s, and especially those areas that are responsible for learning and memory. You know, raw nuts, berries, all of those types of things are really important for the brain, and to get loads of those in, as many of them as you can in there, to promote health and well-being. You could also consider taking a nutritional supplement if you felt that your diet, you weren't getting enough of those types of things, or you don't like fish. Think about maybe taking omega-3s and folates. Again, those are thought to be really, really important when we're trying to promote brain health in later life. Okay. Thank you for listening, and I hope you will have found some of that information helpful today.